Today I'm going to be talking to you about the Emu War, which is a war that you probably didn't even know happened, much less how it affected the world. If I were to ask you who would win a war between emus and Australians, you would probably say the Australians. However, that'd be wrong. But the Australians definitely won the second attempt, right? Wrong again. The Australians lost the war to emus not once, but twice. Today I'm going to be telling you about the circumstances leading up to the Emu War itself, and the aftermath of the Emu War. In order to talk about the Emu War, we first have to talk about World War I. That's right, one little known fact about the World War I is that it indirectly caused the Emu War. After World War I, veterans were given land in Western Australia to take up farming, more specifically, wheat farming. However, problems arose in the 1930s when they weren't given the promised subsidies, which was financial support offered by the government. This led to the farmers saying that they weren't going to deliver the wheat they had harvested. However, emus came along and made an already bad problem worse. They were destroying the crops, eating them, and just generally causing havoc. So what did the Australian government decide to do about this? The reason the Emu War is actually called a war was honestly because of media attention. It was called a war because the government decided to use armed forces in order to control the birds. This was decided by Sir George Pearce, who decided that this was the best way to deal with the birds. In October of 1932, the war started. However, because of rainfall, it was actually delayed until November 2nd. The military started encamping where they didn't even see that many birds. They tried and failed to shoot many of them and eventually went home. They kept going back out, and after about a week, they eventually withdrew the war altogether. They ended up using 2,500 rounds of ammunition, and the amount of birds killed for the first attempt was estimated to be about 50, although some sources say that the number was as high as 500. Even so, this definitely isn't enough to warrant the use of resources and time that they dedicated to this. They did try again almost a week later, but they weren't very successful. The birds would run from them, and they would also have a leader who would warn the other birds when the military was coming up. So the aftermath of the war, which was only about 2 weeks, they tried a second time, which only lasted a few days as opposed to the week of the first attempt. By December 1932, the news had reached the UK and they were not happy. They considered the war an extermination of rare birds and destruction for no reason. This also caused the war to get more media attention, leading to a lot of critiques on the Australian government. From the late 1930s onwards, the government decided to start using exclusion barrier fencing around their farms to keep them out, which worked. This is also what we use these days in our own Henry Dorley Zoo. You might see them along the pathways. So I hope today I was able to teach you more about this war that you probably knew very little about. We went over the circumstances leading up to the war and why it was deemed necessary, the attempts of the war and why it failed, and the aftermath of the war and things it has caused. The war also sparked many memes today, and there will be a movie adaptation coming out next year. So hopefully you will all watch that and use what you learned today to enjoy it. Thank you.